Hello, and welcome to VMware Aria Automation Getting Started video series, your journey to success. In this video, Cloud Administrator will add a VMware Aria Automation project. A project is a construct that links users to cloud resources. Cloud resources can include things like cloud zones, such as, like the cloud zones you created in the previous videos. In order to do things like create virtual machines or create cloud templates, which we'll learn about later as well, you will need to create a project. So let's jump into the product a bit and see how this works. So if we go into VMware Aria Automation Assembler, we can see under Infrastructure, Administration, and then there's Projects. When we create projects, basically we're adding members and cloud zones so that those members of the project can deploy resources to the associated cloud zone. As the Automation Assembler Administrator can create projects for like development teams or production teams, for example, each with different policies and constraints, and also they could use different cloud zones. You can then assign project administrators and members. So if you want certain individuals to manage the project itself, you can assign those type of roles, which we'll see in just a second. Projects are generally, kind of designed to support the needs of the business. So you're defining user level permissions as well as working with various cloud zones and then adding constraints and other properties that may help, to achieve the needs of the business within that project. So if I go to project here and click new project, then I'm just going to go and give it a name. So I'll give it a name, just Corp. And then the next thing you're going to generally do is add users. Now you don't necessarily need to add users in order to create the project. If you don't like add users, administrators will be able to see the project and so forth. But if you wanted users to be able to go in and see things that they build, or maybe see only certain items in the service broker catalog, which you'll also learn about later. You may want to have folks in certain projects, and then they can only see certain catalog items because those are also based on projects. So, in that sense, you may want to add users, but generally you're going to add some users at least for administrative purposes or for access to resources. So here you would just add users, and then you can find your users in the drop-down list. You'll be able to assign certain roles like either administrator, member, viewer, or supervisor. So obviously administrator would be an administrator of the project, so they could, manage the users, they could add zones, they could, do things like that. Members will only be able to see resources that they provision, and then viewers can view it, but they can't do anything. And then supervisors can approve deployment requests. So this is if we wanted to add users to the project, and then we can add them. And we can also add groups as well. So if you wanted to add a group, then we pull in your user groups as well. Then the next thing is really kind of the provisioning section. And this is really the larger section in terms of all the stuff that you can do within a project. However, the key thing really for the most part is adding your zones here. So when we go into create a new project, one of the first things we're going to do in the provisioning section here is add our zones. And that way, when we go to do our deployments, things like that, we can make sure that if a template or a service catalog item is requesting resources from a cloud zone here, or to deploy resources onto a cloud zone, that's part of this project. We want to make sure that it's in here, because otherwise you can get errors and things like that if the zones aren't identified properly. In this particular case, we have one cloud zone, so I'm just going to add it. Now there are some additional kind of properties you can set here that would be specific to this cloud zone. You can do it now, or you can always come back in later. You can change the provisioning priority, meaning if you have multiple cloud zones, which one would have priority if the system had to choose. In other words, if kind of all things were the same, or if the system needs one other level of determination of where it needs to go, then that priority could make a difference. Instance limit is how many, obviously instances we can deploy to this cloud zone, and then memory, CPU, and storage limit specific to the cloud zone itself. So all of those are available, and there's little handy, bubbles here to help with some of this as well if you need additional information. Okay, so we add our cloud zone. And there are some other things that we can do here as well. I'm not going to go into all of these in great detail in this video, because we will probably run across some of these later potentially, but let's go ahead and just sort of look at some of these. So there's like placement policies. So you can set a placement policy that will be applied. And we can do things like default spread or spread by memory. And then in the bubble, there's a little bit of an explanation. So you could do a spread where it's going to provision compute resources in the zone with the smallest ratio of number of VMs to number of hosts, and things like that. So we could set up a quick placement policy if we want to change it from the default. Also, we can add tags to machines that are provisioned through the project, and then also constraints. So we can constrain the project to certain networks or storage, for examples. So essentially, we could say, okay, we want certain networks to be available, or we want certain networks to not be available, depending on how we do the constraint. So if we go in and we put an exclamation mark, for instance, in the beginning, then we would be saying, do not allow that network to be a part of the project deployments. Also, we can add custom properties to the requests or to the deployments. So if we wanted to add a custom property to things that get deployed to this project, we could do that. That could be payload information and so forth. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and just cover those things for now in the provisioning section. We will get to custom naming and some of these other features within the project later on in a future video. The other section, the other thing that you may see also in the projects is the Kubernetes provisioning. So if you have Kubernetes zones identified within VMware Aria Automation, then we can add those zones here for the provisioning of clusters. Okay, once we have everything that we need, we can go ahead and click create, and then our core project is now created with our single cloud zone. In the following video, we're going to show you how to create quick VMs using the quick VM create wizard. Thank you for watching.